Good morning. I'm humbled to be here today with survivors and loved ones of the victims from the 2018 shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue. I can't tell you how much your stories have stayed with me. And I'm also honored to be here with thought leaders and guests. In my line of work, I constantly investigate attacks. It's always important to know what were the reasons for attacks. It will help us in future events, prevention, understanding. Where was the individual, the attacker, radicalized? On what forms? How did he get to that stage of carrying out attack? What was his target? All these elements are important for our understanding of terrorism. The Tree of Life massacre, Tree of Life Synagogue massacre was one of these cases that I studied very much, and actually it eventually led me to write a book about it. An attack like the Tree of Life Synagogue shooting didn't happen in a vacuum. It had circumstances in the world, including political and social changes, that had an important element that affected the attack. At that time, when we're talking about 2018, in the months before the shooting, hate was filled in many communities. Refugees were seen as a threat to the white supremacist communities. Articles upon articles indicated that they are being a threat. They were called murderers, invaders, and so on. And during that climate, in the weeks before the Pittsburgh shooting, there was the consensus within the white supremacists of growing fear of their existence, growing fear that the refugees are going to destroy an outcome, and with an outcome that the white supremacists, the white race, will not survive. October 27, 2018, Robert Bowers, one of the members in that community, posted the message that I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. He decided to carry out an attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue while the HIAS was hosting an event. He posted the message and headed, fully loaded with weapon, to carry out his massacre. "Screw your optics, I'm going in." His words before he closed his computer and went for his shooting sparked a whole new movement that changed and transformed hate into violence, into a whole new movement that we are seeing the results today even. What screw your optics meant is going against the political ideas within the far-right and conservatives communities that what will bring the change to the white race is not violence, is not carrying out attacks, but will really survive by political changes. If you want to achieve your targets, let's work in the political agenda. And that was the main school of thought that Bowers and many of the other white supremacists were actually going through and indoctrinated on their forms and meeting places online. But the circumstances during the time where Bowers went to carry out his attack, it was such a fear that was part of conspiracy theories that the immigrants, the refugees, are going to basically bring an end to the white race. And there was the sense that we have to act. And screw your optics was that what Bowers meant. He said, I can't take it anymore. We have to start our action. And immediately after his attack, there was a whole new world for us monitoring the platforms of the white supremacists that we've not seen before. It was the slogan and the mantra of the screw your optics that spread everywhere, with calls immediately that Robert Bowers is a saint, Robert Bowers is a hero, and he's going to save us. You know, it's true. He wasn't the first one to go and carry out attacks against Jews. He wasn't the first one to carry out attacks against minorities. But there were a lot of elements in his attack that were, in the sense, made the community feel inspired. First, he attacked the organization that was sponsored immigrants, a real threat to the white supremacist communities, and above all, it was a Jewish organization. It's in a synagogue, which is, Jews, as you all know, is the main fear and is loaded with conspiracy theories. The Jews are behind all the suffer that the world is seeing. In addition, it was a time where they had the fear of the immigrants. And third, the outcome of the attack. It was successful. He killed people. And these are the style of messages that were spreading social media. And sadly to say that up till now, we can still see these messages. And when you see a lot of messages like that, you will expect to see more. And this is not working. All right. And this is what happened, where I call the chain of reactions. Bowers' attack didn't end there. Bowers' attack was not an isolated incident. March 2019, you're all familiar with the Christchurch attack by Baron Tarrant, who carried out his massacre on Muslims in the mosque on Friday prayers. Now check out his post on HN. He posted, linked to his video, his manifesto titled, Screw Your Optics. It wasn't surprising that he used that word, that term, that mantra, because this was the mantra and the slogan that you saw all over social media affiliated with the far-right community. For me, seeing the word screw your optics connected to the Christchurch attack, it was, oh my God, this went above and beyond what we expected. It changed the landscape, and the hate is now translated to violence. Now, Tarrant didn't have a problem with Jews. And he said that even specifically in his manifesto. He didn't even have a problem with Israel. He had a problem with refugees in Europe, and that was his major threat. Yet, he used screw your optics, and he connected to the same chain of attacks. Attacks that killed, the massacre, 51 and injured 40. Now, Tarrant's attack is something that I called the 9/11 of the white supremacists. I've been dealing with terrorism for over 2 decades. Every attack, one of the things we do constantly is monitor reactions, because reactions will tell us what we should expect in the future and how it's going to be done, and the volume of reactions. We have never seen kind of reactions like after Tarrant's attack. People ask me many times, was it the same like 9/11? After 9/11, I said no, because in 9/11 you didn't have message boards, you didn't have social media, you didn't have applications. So what you saw is what was broadcast on TV or people protesting on the streets. But this hatred like this and fears and indoctrinations are spread very quickly due to the use of social media. And literally we couldn't, all our people in the office were busy tracking everything happening of the Christchurch attack, and we couldn't even save 1/3 of it. It was sky the limit of the reactions that we were seeing. And it was clear that this is going to be leading to more. And in fact, immediately after, in April 27, a month later, John Earnest in San Diego carried out his attack on a Chabad synagogue on Shabbat at the last day of Passover. And his attack was completely inspired by Robert Bowers and John and Tarrant, the Christchurch attacker. Now look what he said. He said, if you had told me 6 months ago that I would do this, I would have been surprised. And I'm looking at his manifesto, 6 months, the days that Robert Bauer carried out his attack. Earnest's manifesto was very short, only 2.5 pages. In these 2.5 pages, more than half a dozen, he mentioned Bowers. He mentioned how Bowers' attack inspired him. There was a sentence that I couldn't stop reading over and over. He said, who inspires me? He wrote the manifesto in a kind of Q&A. Who inspired me? And he says, Jesus Christ, makes sense. Martin Luther, Adolf Hitler, names that you will expect, and then Robert Bowers. He is putting Robert Bowers in the same level like Jesus Christ and Adolf Hitler, just to show that how an attack in Pittsburgh, Tree of Life Synagogue, that only a few knew it existed, inspired a whole world of terrorist attacks throughout the world. And why? Because social media makes the connection immediate and very fast. And that's kind of reactions and results that we experience. Now, Earnest carried out attack very similar to Bowers, also in a synagogue and also against the Jews. Not like Tarrant, yet Tarrant inspired him very much. Tarrant gave him the idea of how to carry out the attack and prepare for the attack. And of course, he became a hero. He was saint. Now, at this stage, I would say, these images are not just spread spontaneously over the message boards or social media. At this stage, the internet and applications have created new media groups, new terrorist organizations that followed the line of screw your optics. It was, some of you might be familiar with some of these groups, something like View Creek Division, Moon Creek Division, Terror Wave Refiners, and so on, spreading everywhere the propaganda and the indoctrination for who's going to be next. I didn't want to post some of the things and posts and messages that they post because it just, messages that you read and you can't really believe that anyone can incite for these kinds of attacks. But the urgency for who's going to be the next? You have to be are you going to be the next hero that we will all adore you? Are you going to be the next saint? And they were all saints. It doesn't matter what you belong to, whether you kill Muslims or Jews, you are going to be the next saint. So media organization, real massive grassroots movement is spread to indoctrinate more people. These are just some of the messages posted online. As you can see, they're glorifying them as saints. You look at these pictures, these guys are terrorists. They are not saints. but for them, those are the saints. And I call it in my book, I compare them to ISIS, where ISIS individuals, inspired attackers, were afterward named by ISIS as soldiers of the caliphate, and those are saints of the community. August 3rd, about 3 months after Earnest attack, Patrick Cruz carries out his attack in Walmart. Many of you are very familiar with that. It was part of the chain of Screw Your Optic. Not only that he posted his manifesto and his message at the same place like Earnest and Tarrant and others, he wrote in his manifesto specifically, I'm carrying out this attack because of Tarrant and like him. He even said that he didn't think about that attack. He didn't even think about attacking the Hispanic community until he read the manifestos, until he started seeing the Screw Your Optic, the new line of violence, the hate that is translated to violence, and that's where he started preparing for his next attack. He killed 23 and injured 26, and you can see his quotes there. Now, he was not white supremacist. To the contrary, I looked at his Twitter account, investigated his profiles everywhere, and he even said in his manifesto, I reject the title of white supremacist. I am not one of you. If any, he said in his manifesto, the media is going to call me white supremacist. I'm not. And in fact, he was right. When you look at his Twitter account, it was a Twitter account that was just another, Trump supporter, Republican, just another, not something that indicated that he might be the next mass shooter in the United States. He attacked immigrants, he attacked Mexicans in Texas. And he said specifically, I'm not one of you. Yet, the community accepted him as part of the chain of saints. Why? Because every attack will accelerate the movement. Every attack that you will carry out will speed up the momentum, will bring another individual that will carry out the next and next attack, and their voice will be heard. Less than a week later, in Norway, again, another shooter. He went to attack a mosque, very similar to Tarrant. He failed, but still, he was part of the Screw Your Optics, and he said that specifically. He didn't kill anyone. To the contrary, he was almost killed by the worshippers in the mosque. It didn't matter. What mattered is that somebody continues the momentum, and he became part of the Screw Your Option current. And this was his manifesto. Now, if you look at his manifesto, it tells you a lot, because it tells you about the chain of the Chads, the chain of their heroes. Starts in his case from Tarrant to Earnest and Cruz's, and then he was the next. And what he said is, Tarrant elected me, and now who is going to be next that will be elected by me? And now, just think about it. 20 years ago, when I started my work going undercover, infiltrating front groups of terrorist organizations in the United States, I actually had to be present in these events. I had to be there. I had to record them. He said, she said, I had to prove what I have to say. And it was about location. It was about being somewhere and experiencing it. Now, all these individuals, millions, God knows the sky is the limit, can experience the attack the moment it happens. It doesn't matter where you are. The internet changed the whole thought of thinking when we look at a terrorist attack. Terrorist attack in Pittsburgh changed the entire landscape on how we see today the far-right community. And it doesn't stop there. It continues. And I just had to choose some because I had 30 minutes where choosing the ones that really show the differences between the attacks and the attackers and the targets, yet they're all part of the same style, the same current, the same breed of attacks. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the Yom Kippur attack in Germany. He posted again manifesto, style of Terrence and Bowers and others, and went to carry out his attack with the GoPro video and filming the entire thing. His target was Yom Kippur, Jewish synagogue, during high holiday service. And as you can see, when he got into the car, and I'm watching the video, he says, "My name is Anan." Anan is a reference to anonymous. It's the names that they use on the chance forms. And he says, "I think that the Holocaust have never happened, and feminism is the cause for decline of the white race." This is a school of thought. This is the conspiracy theory that really instigate and indoctrinate many of these attackers, and not only attackers, but within the white supremacist community, and blames the Jews for everything, anything that happens. He went to carry out his attack, but he failed. He wasn't able to go into the synagogue. And instead, he just started shooting at people randomly in Germany. He killed 2 Germans, a woman, or 3 Germans, a woman and 2 men. They were not his target. He failed. In all standards, he failed in achieving his own goals, but he became a saint. He became another hero within the community because he was able to accelerate the movement. And so reasons don't matter, outcome of the immediate results don't matter. What matters is that you go and continue the violence. And this is, now, all these individuals never met with each other. And I remember as every attack happens, investigators will conclude he acted alone. And I'm seeing always these lines. None of them acted alone. They're all connected to each other. It's true. They're not sitting around fireplace near the beach or somewhere, or in a kitchen, but they're sitting in that fireplace and kitchen online. And this is where the communication, the friendship, and many of you have been seeing, you all have kids, you're new generation, and many of you are in the field, so I don't even need to say more than that. But the chain of attackers was triggered from Bowers, and it didn't stop there. Now, this community will adapt to any new changes. If it is not the immigrants that are bothering us now, it will be something else. They will find reasons to adapt and capitalize on to continue translating their hate into violence. The guy on the left, Timothy Wilson, is somebody who we were following for a long time. He had a group and a leader of neo-Nazi community online. He was part of the Square Optics. He was literally planning his attack before COVID started. Once COVID started, the conspiracy theories started changing. It wasn't about refugees anymore. It was COVID. COVID doesn't exist. Show us COVID. COVID is just something new that the Jews have created to eliminate the white race, etc. And many of you know all these stories. And instead of attacking a synagogue, he decided to attack a hospital. And he was killed on gunshots with the FBI after he had his car bomb prepared and parked near the hospital, carrying out attack against doctors that possibly a few months earlier were taking care of him, or nurses. It wasn't an enemy that was living among the white supremacists for a generation. The enemy changes once you start with a hate against one. It will lead to hate to many other communities. Suddenly, the hate is against your own people. It's against your own doctors and nurses. And the sky's the limit to who's going to be the next to be killed by those that hate. Kyle Rittenhouse. Many of you are familiar. It's during the riots with the far right and the far left in, where was that? Oh gosh, in Oregon. And he, a 18-year-old Trump supporter, again, has no indication of terrorism at all, just another patriotic individual went and shot two. He's not part of the white supremacist community. He's not part of the far-right community. And he was named a saint. And just to say a sentence about this, this was a turning point in the way that we were thinking, given, because the white supremacists and the far right, until I would say COVID, BLM movements, were two separate movements. The white supremacists actually were against Trump supporters. They were calling them idiots and whatever, because they didn't think that these guys are going to bring the answer. This is just another political change, and nothing is going to lead to any changes. But BLM starts, COVID-19, and other election and changes in the world brought the two movements together, brought them to the point that they shared now the same groups, thousands, hundreds of thousands, creating also the QAnon movement. It was created before, but it was populated now by both movements together, bringing to deadly events such as the January 6th attack, which I detail in my book on how exactly and what were the circumstances that brought these two movements together. My time is almost ended, and so those are the principles that I learned and the message that I have from what we have learned is, one, hate breeds. Once it starts, you can't stop it. And it has to be eliminated from the moment it starts. And I was involved in many, many schools of thought that let's just have a conversation and try to counter that hate. And I can tell you, there is not enough good words that can counter that hate. There is no way you can converse with that kind of movement. It's impossible. There are no good ideas, which is I just covered. The movement is a movement that will, as I showed, will adapt any idea, from refugees to vaccine to mandate of vaccine, and almost everyone now is a target. I can tell you, I see my name. Well, that's not surprising, but I'm seeing doctors, nurses, companies, any kind of company. Who's not a target of this movement now? Evolving targets and the way we maintain the landscape now on the internet. There is, again, as long as there is no real understanding and countering of the internet infrastructure, it's going to grow. The main difference today between what we experienced, I experienced 20 years ago, is today terrorist organizations are born on the internet. There is no need to know who's the leader. The internet can serve as the platform that creates these entities. And if that is not going to be countered, and hate continues to grow, violence will continue, and everyone can be a target. And I want to end with you reading this poem that I thought really summarized a lot what I have said and a lot of what we are seeing today. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for listening to me.